Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical area of weakness in Mikel Arteta's Arsenal backline throughout the early stages of the new Premier League season. So in today's video, first we'll focus on Arsenal's pressing against Crystal Palace and Leicester City, then we'll analyze their defensive shape in those games, and then we'll shift to how both sides were looking to exploit the space in behind the Arsenal fullbacks. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, first we're going to analyze how Arsenal pressed Crystal Palace, and one of the key advantages that helped them really disrupt the Crystal Palace attack was that they were both playing in a 4-2-3-1. So they were able to match up in that midfield zone and stay organized. And then in terms of the numerical advantage between the center backs and Gabriel Jesus, you'd witness Gabriel Jesus step into the path of Guehi. Martinelli would push to Anderson and block off the passing lane in towards Klein. And from there, you'd have Zinchenko pushing towards Klein and Gabriel shifting across to deal with Ayew. And the same would apply on the opposite flank. If you had Martinelli sticking on Klein, it would be Gabriel Jesus pushing to Anderson, Saka stepping into the path of Guehi and blocking off the passing lane into Mitchell, and then that would spring Ben White pushing forward to close down Mitchell, and you'd have Saliba stepping forward to deal with Zaha. In many cases, that left that midfield battle with Odegaard sticking on Doucouré, Xhaka tracking the movement of Eze, and Thomas Partey pushing forward to deal with Schlupp. If they weren't looking to press from the front, they were still capable of shutting down the Crystal Palace midfield from working through the lines by having both Odegaard and Gabriel Jesus dropping onto Schlupp and Doucouré. And from there, Eze and Edouard were dropping into space between the lines, but Thomas Partey and Xhaka could block off the passing lane and protect the center backs. And if those players look to drop off in towards that space between the lines, then Xhaka and Thomas Partey would look to close them down. Therefore, when you question how Crystal Palace were able to get into good positions, it was simply down to them playing long direct balls over the Arsenal backline. They were willing to allow the center backs to push forward and tempt them to play these passes, and in regards to Guehi, they were successful as he was unable to connect with his teammates, but it was Anderson in particular who was causing havoc and getting the Crystal Palace attackers into the final third. What you would see in the first half was that he was looking to ping balls into the path of Zaha to get him into 1v1s with White, and as that wasn't working, Zaha was shifting into central areas to pull White narrow, and then that would see Mitchell pushing forward to peg back Saka. In those situations, while Crystal Palace did get themselves into good areas, White was able to cope with Zaha as the Crystal Palace attackers' nonchalant movement in towards the penalty area allowed White to have cover from Saka, and simply it allowed other players to shift across to provide that cover. And in many cases, when you ended up seeing Mitchell push forward, Saka did a very good job of tracking his movement to negate his threat. While Anderson still was swinging balls out to the path of Zaha and Mitchell in the second half, he predominantly focused on now getting Ayew in behind Zinchenko as he was making forward runs in beyond the left back and getting the ball in very good areas, but struggling to make an impact when he received it. As that game continued, that forced Gabriel to shift over to provide cover, and that ultimately limited Ayew's threat. In that situation, you need one of the attacking players to step forward to apply a bit of pressure towards Anderson, as he simply had too much time to pick out the runs of the wide players in behind. And in these situations, you simply need one of the central players to step towards the ball-carrying center back and block off the passing lane into Schlupp or Doucouré, or simply have one of them applying pressure towards that center back, and then you could have Thomas Partey or Xhaka stepping forward to ensure that the ball can't get facilitated through the midfield. And then when you shift to Leicester, they did play in a 3-5-1-1, so they had a 4v3 advantage in that midfield zone with Maddison dropping off into the central areas, and it was simply down to the fact that no one was picking up Dewsbury Hall as Odegaard was stepping towards Ndidi, Thomas Partey was sticking on Maddison, and that resulted in Thomas Partey having to push forward. And from there, even if you have Xhaka shifting over to deal with Maddison, that leaves Tielemans free on that left-hand side. Here you see Thomas Partey and Odegaard stepping to Dewsbury Hall and Ndidi, and that leaves Tielemans free. When Marte finds him, that pulls out Xhaka, and now you see Xhaka and Thomas Partey shifting to the ball and Maddison looking to receive it. Because Thomas Partey looks to cut out the passing lane into Maddison, it now frees up Dewsbury Hall, and Leicester City from here can progress their play because of that midfield overload. So what we ended up seeing from Arsenal was that you know that they do have the front three closing down the center backs, and then Zinchenko and White pushing forward to the wing backs. But what we ended up seeing from them here was that when the ball was shifted to the left-hand side, Saka would tuck in to close down Dewsbury Hall, and vice versa. If the ball was shifted to the right-hand side, Martinelli would tuck in to deal with Tielemans as they shifted across the pitch. The other option that we saw from them was that Saka was blocking off the passing lane into Dewsbury Hall when he stepped towards Amarte, and that was successful as well. But once again, when you look at how Leicester were able to get into good areas, if it wasn't down to the pressing breakdowns, they were simply clipping long balls out into the path of Justin, who was consistently winning aerial duels against White and looking to play in his teammates. And simply when he got into those zones, whether he was played in behind White or winning the aerial duels, it was simply down to that final touch or final decision in the final third that ultimately led to Leicester City's demise. Over on the left-hand side, with Zinchenko pushing forward, they were able to play balls around him into the path of Vardy to get him into those 1v1s with Gabriel, or simply getting him in behind Gabriel, and that was a big worry, and a lot of that is down to Arsenal's shape. They have Zinchenko moving into that midfield zone and then Xhaka providing cover, but if you're able to wrap the ball around Xhaka into that space with a pacey wide player or attacker, then they're probably going to get in behind Xhaka in towards the channel, and that pulls out Gabriel and it shifts across the Arsenal backline. But in many cases throughout that game against Leicester, what you end up seeing was that if the center backs were able to have a bit of time and space on the ball because the central Arsenal players weren't stepping to apply a bit of pressure, they were looking to ping long diagonal balls out towards Justin to isolate him against White. And if that wasn't the case, when Arsenal's press did struggle due to the fact that Dewsbury Hall and Maddison's movement were pulling them out of position because of the overload, then when they bypassed that initial phase of the press, they were simply looking to get the ball out to Justin in attacking zones.
In this example, with Saka and Thomas Partey not getting tight towards Maddison and Dewsbury Hall, it forces Martinelli to shift central. Now with Martinelli shifting towards Maddison and Fofana finding Maddison, that leaves an open lane for Tielemans to receive the ball. Maddison identifies that space and he slides it across Martinelli and focus on Dewsbury Hall's movement. When Tielemans receives the ball, he can play it square to Dewsbury Hall, and he also has Castagna looking forward. However, he aims to play the ball into the path of Vardy when Martinelli gets tight, and he plays it towards his feet, which allows Vardy to lay the ball off in towards Dewsbury Hall to run at the Arsenal backline. As that play develops, you can identify Zinchenko's poor positioning, and that creates an open passing lane for Castagna, and look at Justin calling for the ball. Vardy's movement pulls away Saliba and White, and now Castagna with enough space could clip the ball into the path of Justin, but here his delivery is too close towards Ramsdale, who's able to push it away to deny Justin a free header from point blank range. And then in this example, Saka doesn't get tight towards Amarte, and you have Maddison dropping in towards the midfield zone freely. Because Thomas Partey doesn't get tight because he's focused on the positioning of Dewsbury Hall, Maddison's able to spin away from Odegaard and Saka to carry the ball in towards the Arsenal half. As Thomas Partey now looks to shift across, Maddison has enough time and space to locate the poor positioning of White and Justin breaking off him, and as you can see, that allows the Leicester City wingback to break in behind the Arsenal backline.
And then even when they shifted to more of that 4-3-1-2 diamond,
you were able to see the Leicester strikers now having more space to break in behind the fullbacks.
And the Arsenal center backs in Saliba and Gabriel did a very good job of dealing with that threat. And along with Maddison dropping off deeper into space to get on the ball, even when you look to the build up to their goal, you see that Arsenal's press was bypassed due to a lack of communication and work rate to close down markers. And once again, they simply targeted Zinchenko down that left-hand side. And while Ramsdale did a poor job of dealing with that threat, you could see that Arsenal's fullbacks were being targeted. And even in the build-up to the opening goal, it was a long ball into the path of Justin where he was able to win the ball over White, and it led to an Arsenal mistake. So as you could see, while Arsenal's perfect start to the Premier League campaign shouldn't be dismissed, it's clear that opposing teams have identified an area of weakness to exploit that will likely be replicated, and frankly, better players and teams will punish their backline if Arteta refuses to make tactical adjustments.